Yeah, thanks for coming. My name is Johan Enqvistn, and yeah, I think we're even early before the schedule, so appreciate you being here. After Unsi's talk tomorrow morning, I feel a little bit like I'm giving a plenary here or something, but it's just a regular presentation. Yes, so I'm going to talk today about our project Unruly Natures, which has been running for a couple of years in Cape Town. The project itself is based at Stockholm University, but the team and the field site is in Cape Town. And I've been living there for 6-7 years. I should say that my background is not in conservation. I'm sort of a researcher in social-ecological systems and looking at, as Chloe said, in sort of civic engagement in urban environmental stewardship. So yeah, as we saw, a garden route audience probably doesn't need too much of an introduction to baboon controversies. But you might ask why Sweden is interested in urban baboons. Let's see, is this working? It worked earlier, but not. There we go. Hey. So around the world, cities are impacting biodiversity. I'm sure many of you know. Very simplified, you can look at this as a sort of a two-directional process where urbanization is encroaching into biodiversity-rich land. This recent paper found that sort of urban expansion within key biodiversity priority areas is higher than the global average. At the same time, you also have regreening of a lot of urban space, where cities are trying to tackle climate change, or as we heard yesterday, to improve human well-being and psychological well-being. And bringing sort of more greenery into cities also often implies that a lot of wildlife comes back into cities. And this is sort of an example of also what Unsi talked about yesterday with sort of this increasingly human-altered planets, where nature is also adapting to us and kind of adapting to the new world that we are creating. And a kind of a really important management challenge of this is that there's no baseline really. There's no sort of natural way of what urban nature is supposed to look like, right? So there's no objectively correct way of dealing with this. And again, as also Unsi mentioned yesterday, transitioning to this kind of more unknown unknown territory can cause a lot of conflict between different views of what should be done. And here's where our sort of case study comes in. We are looking at a case where this kind of conflict manifests at two levels. So first you have the conflict between humans and baboons over access to urban space and to resources, often food and so on. And at the same time, you have another layer, which is more of a conflict between people, between humans and humans, over what we should do about urban baboons. Should we allow them in? Should we push them out? Should we adapt to them? Or should we kind of limit their presence in the urban space? It's a social media images and video of what can happen when the baboons venture into urban spaces. You'll hear more about the first layer of this conflict later in the session by Jocelyn. But our focus on this project has been more on the human-human conflicts, where we're asking, how divided are people really? Beyond the kind of the social media debates and the kind of polarization that you hear a lot about, how divided are actually the residents living in these areas? And what can we do about sort of these divides and polarization? And the challenge here is that we're not just dealing with wildlife. I mean, that's not a new point to be made in conservation. I know you're all aware that often there's people you have to deal with. But in the urban space, this is kind of really dialed up and making it made more complicated than in many other areas. And in Cape Town, as in many towns around the garden routes, the public debate often gets sort of divided between these, or dominated by these two sides that are accusing each other of being extreme in one way or another, either loving baboons or hating baboons. And in those types of situations, simply providing more scientific facts doesn't really sway anybody's minds. You're just people have their views and they often get sort of stuck in those, no matter what kind of information they're given. So the first part of it, how divided are people really? So we approached this by conducting a large survey last year in Cape Town, where we explicitly targeted this sort of silent majority, the people that normally don't get involved in the debate. And to reach them, we went door to door. So we went to people's homes, knocked on their doors, contacted every third household to get a systematic sample, a sort of a more representative sample of the actual population. So we talked to over 500 people, about every sixth household in the neighborhoods that regularly get visited by baboons. We used a data collection tool called SenseMaker, which kind of combines quantitative and qualitative data. So we were allowed to collect these kind of personal stories of people's experiences, as well as looking at the patterns of the sample as a whole. What are we actually kind of seeing, what trends and patterns are we seeing in baboon experiences? And this was done on a sort of a 15-minute survey on a tablet, so people were anonymous, which also allowed them to kind of share their responses themselves rather than telling it to an interviewer, so allow them to answer more honestly. So an analysis of this is still underway, but I'll share some kind of emerging findings that might be interesting. Overall, baboon encounters are common, they're increasing and they're concerning. Almost half of the people we talked to have had baboons inside their homes. Over four or five describe encounters as common or very common. 2/3 say they are increasing. People mostly feel concerned and afraid and distressed when they encounter baboons. But importantly and interestingly, not a single person told us about a baboon physically harming a human being. So they're quite common, but basically we find no evidence of baboons physically attacking or harming people. And when we ask people what they actually, to describe the baboons during the encounter, they say that baboons are usually calm, assertive, and curious, more than kind of aggressive and chaotic and so on. And while most people don't want baboons inside their homes, 82%, only 27%, 1 in 4, want baboons out of their neighborhoods. So there's actually a relatively high tolerance for having baboons around, even though people want sort of some boundaries to not be crossed. So how divided are people really? Well, when we look at sort of proposed actions that target baboons' movement or reproduction, there's a lot of polarization. We see in the top 3 questions there, we're talking about sterilization, contraception, relocation of baboons, and electric fencing. The people are divided. But there's a lot of other questions that they are actually agreeing mostly on. So most people say that we need more education of the residents, we need more baboon rangers, or at least not less of them. And very, very few people think that euthanasia is a good idea. So people don't want to have the baboons killed. There's also a fair amount of agreement around what's causing the negative interactions, so poor waste management, urban expansion, and lack of awareness, and so on. But so given that there are some divides and there is some polarization, what do we do about that? And as also been touched on yesterday, trust is a really kind of key thing here. So we argue that building trust and building empathy for the different views is really critical. And we can't ignore people's subjective experiences, even when they are maybe wrong or like doesn't really match what the science says. We still have to kind of acknowledge that people have their experiences, and that's something that that's gonna influence how they behave. So we have been working with this group called Empatheater, which use theater as a way of sort of having community dialogues and engage with difficult topics. And they use research to create a story. So the theater, the plays are based on research, but they're kind of created this fictional world that's relatable, but with lower stakes than talking about the actual issue or actual people that people know. They use satire and emotion really effectively to allow for people to be more vulnerable and to engage, like sort of show emotions more than just kind of focusing on their opinions. And a key part of this is also that the audience are put in a circle, so you don't only watch the stage. You don't watch the play on a stage, but you watch the play and you watch the other audience members having their reactions to the play. So you kind of have this shared experience of the story you're watching. And then a really key part of the whole experience is also this post-show dialogue. That's where you have a facilitated dialogue that allows for this collective reflection and interrogation of the play. And so we had our first tour of this play in June with a series of dialogues. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a glimpse of what that looked like.
what we have found before is that collecting stories about people's own experiences can be a really, really powerful way of then having a conversation about issues, understanding and empathizing with different opinions, even if they might not be the same as yours. I mean, I found that really important because I know the baboon issue is really polarized, and the communities that are dealing with it are often so divided that they've tried to have conversations for many years as well and not made any progress.
You bad libtards, just because you think you've got the support of the Jane Good for Football Foundation, you think you can just run riot and do as you please.
We need a space in which we can look at multiple ways of being, knowing, and doing together as humans and understand, yes, that's okay, but there are many subjective realities that are leading to the worlds we're creating. Because you've had for decades scientists who are really ill-equipped to deal with social-logical tension and complexities.
Yeah.
Yet, sustainability science actually is teaching a whole new generation of scientists to think not just academic rigor, but political rigor, cultural rigor, spiritual rigor, emotional rigor. These are things that they're needing to be able to navigate.
All the discussions that we've had after the play have been recorded, and we also have these sort of feedback forms that people hand in after. And we're still kind of analyzing this data as well. It's quite recent. But I want to give you some kind of examples of the feedback that we got as well. And some, oh, sorry, it's jumped a little bit here. But, and it's also some ideas of how we think this matters in terms of how the arts and theater in this case can be used in science. So one person said, I was deeply emotional, laughing, crying, mourning, hoping, dreaming. I felt connected to every single character, even though I didn't always want to. And this, I think, is a good example of how theater can enable this kind of emotional connection between divided groups that we often see in the baboon issue. The second quote reads, I had reached a point of frustration about how irreconcilable people's positions are. Having viewed the play, there's some relief to have that played out in the open. Maybe we have to turn away from trying to change the other's mind and work to a solution for the baboons that inevitably means compromise, respect, and trust. So again, we're coming back to trust here as something that's really critical. And I think this is a good example as well of how a play can help you foster imagination of different ways of engaging with the issue. And it's both this kind of like cognitive and emotional process that helps you be more imaginative like that. The last quote, the play made me feel we can do better. It brilliantly shines the lights on human behavior and points to the importance of learning to work together with diverse members of the community to solve problems. The play made me feel we all bear responsibility, no matter what your stance on baboons. If we feel it is only the others who are the problem, we aren't inclusive enough to effect change. That was a new insight. And I think this also kind of shows a little bit on how theater can help you explore different futures beyond your own experience and kind of think, okay, well, where could we head to that's not just based on what I think and what I have, how I view the issue. As I said, this is kind of ongoing work, so really encourage you to kind of follow our research. We have a unrulynatures.com website, and if you're in Cape Town about a month from now, you're very welcome to come see the next tour of the show. Please let me know. I have the email there, and you can also grab me around the venue. Cool. Thank you.